pardon my voice this morning. I had a week at the Reno Air Races and just about lost it. And thank you for inviting me. You guys always have the most amazing locations. I really love this group, and I'll come anytime you want to have a guest speaker. I don't want you to confuse me with anyone that's famous or important here this morning. What I am is the luckiest man on the planet, and I think at the end of today's presentation you will agree with that assessment. I didn't do anything great or heroic. A good landing, as you know, is one you can walk away from, but a really great landing is when you can use the airplane again, and I didn't really do either of those things. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking, gosh, how can a fighter pilot possibly be a keynote speaker? They can't put two sentences together coherently. I get it, I know. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I've worked extremely hard on my vocabulary, and I would just like you to know that I will be using some words in this morning's presentation that are very, very big. I did not feel like the luckiest man in the world the day my aircraft was going down. In fact, I was pretty sure I was going to die in the next 8 seconds. I'd done everything I could do. There was no way to get out of the airplane. I couldn't bail out. It was too low, and I was going to impact the jungle in just a matter of seconds. And I realized my life was about to be over. This is a very sobering thought for a young lieutenant. And I remember at the very last becoming very calm, thinking, well, it'll all be over at a flash. There'll be a big fireball. You'll hit the jungle, and you'll wake up in heaven painlessly. And I clenched my fists and closed my eyes tightly. And the next thing I know, there was a lot of fire and heat and smoke and flames all around me. And I thought, well, maybe you didn't go the way you thought you were going to go. Quickly realizing I was still alive, I was able to get myself unstrapped, ran across the wing, laid in the jungle. If you want heroes in my story, it's the Special Forces people that came to rescue me, and those were my true heroes. They medevaced me back to Thailand, and the doc said, whoa, this kid's not going to make it across the Pacific. He's going to die. Send him to Okinawa, send him to the hospital there at Kadena. Let him die there. We'll ship his body home in a box. That was the plan for Lieutenant B. Shul. Well, they shipped me up to Okinawa at Kadena Air Base there, and they shipped a 9-man burn team out of Fort Sam Houston all the way to Okinawa just for me. We got to know each other real well in the next 2 months. Mostly I just cursed at them daily. And those people were there to save my life. Now, I'm an inspirational speaker today. I go all over the world, and this is the hardest part of my whole talk for me because I have to admit to you that I gave up and actually quit. I actually gave up and asked God to just let me die. After a few weeks there, I saw my weight go from 180 pounds of raw muscle and steel, as you see today, to 119. 119. They said, if you lose another half pound, we cannot save you. And food just wouldn't go down. My body wouldn't take it. And I didn't care. At that point, I said, this is just too horrendous anyway. I can't do it. God, you picked the wrong person. It's way too much torture and pain. Just let me die. And I'm almost embarrassed to admit that, but yet sometimes we have to reach rock bottom before we can make the long climb back. And I had reached rock bottom. And the turning point for me was a very simple thing. It was just an attitudinal adjustment. I was laying there one day, and out the third floor window, I could see the soccer field where the kids came and played soccer every afternoon. And I could hear them kicking and laughing and playing with the ball and playing soccer, and I thought, I was those kids if I could just be out there one more time. My daddy was a Marine for 32 years. He didn't teach us how to give up and be big babies. And I was starting to feel a little guilty, even though I was just emaciated physically. And the next thing I know, Judy Garland comes on the radio singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow at that moment, truly. We had one station, one radio in that room. How many of you know the words to Somewhere Over the Rainbow? Anybody in here know? No, you don't. Put your hands down. See, you think you do. I thought I did. It's a kid song from The Wizard of Oz, Yellow Brick Road. That's a fun, no. That is a very adult philosophical song, and if you listen to the words in there about daring to dream, Well, the words penetrated my brain sharper than any scalpel the surgeons were using that morning. But it wasn't so much Judy Garland singing that song, and it wasn't some magical thing where God appeared in my room. It was just a change of attitude. I made a decision at that moment. I was going to try to eat the food tomorrow, and I was going to quit being a big baby. Even if I died, it was okay. And the next morning, they came in. And isn't it amazing, by the way, how the simplest change in attitude can change the whole rest of your life? Just the change in attitude. You know, attitude's everything. When I used to teach at Tucson, I used to tell my students, I can teach, anyone can learn stick and rudder, but I cannot teach you attitude. You have it or you don't. The next day they came in with the food, and they can see I was really trying or wanted to eat, and my body rejected it. It wouldn't go down. And they said, oh, come on. And I said, God, please just ignore everything I said for the last week. I want to eat now. I want to live. And my body rejected it. Finally, there was an Army corpsman there, had a sack lunch his wife had packed. He said, well, maybe there's something in here he could eat. And there was nothing except a little plastic cup of cherry Kool-Aid. And that cherry Kool-Aid went down real smooth. They ran to the commissary, and they got every pack of cherry Kool-Aid they could find. I drank 3.2 gallons of cherry Kool-Aid the first day. I lived on 4 to 5 gallons of Kool-Aid a day for 5 days, mixed in with a few saltines. I peed real good. And they said, well, that's even a better sign. He has no internal injuries. He has not one thing wrong with him internally. It's all external. Doc said, you look like hell, but I think we can save you. You're young. You don't have any internal injuries. You're going to have to just fight through this. And I said, I got a whole different attitude. Let's go. Well, that was brave talk for someone that hadn't been transported to the Brooke Army Medical Center, Burn Center in Fort Sam, Houston, which I was a few weeks later. Spent a year at the Burn Center there. I'm not going to bore you with that adventure. Let's just say I don't believe in miracles. I count on them. My mom said that to me one day. She read it in a card, and she said, isn't this a great quote? I said, well, yeah, Mom, come on, son. She said, no. Sometimes you got to count on miracles to happen, and don't think they don't. So I'm laying in my hospital bed one day working with my clay ball. Of course, I thought I'd never fly again, barely able to walk. They said, well, you're just going to be discharged from the Air Force. You'll get your disability and be gone with you. And I didn't accept that whole concept. I knew I'd probably never fly again because my hands were really messed up. I couldn't even move them. And I was just kind of a little depressed, but I was plowing through, and the mission was to get out of the burn ward. That was the main mission in life. And I had no concept of my future. I just knew that every time the Air Force sent me the discharge paper, I threw it away in the trash. They didn't like that too much. And if you know anything about San Antonio, the Military Personnel Center is only 15 minutes away from Brooke Army Medical Center where I was. And they were just dumbfounded as to what to do with me. I was still technically on duty, but they pretty much heard he's never going to fly again, so why doesn't he just sign the discharge? I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It's one of those attitude things. I had a picture of a jet on my wall, which you weren't allowed to have any pictures on the wall in the burn ward, but I did. And that motivated me through therapy. And the psychiatrist used to come down and talk to me. He says, you know, you're probably never going to fly again, so you better get used to this idea. I said, hey, pal, I get all that. But you need to understand, if I'm going to get through the therapy, which, oh, by the way, hurts worse than the original injury, I need a little motivation, even if it's pretend. And I used to pretend that I was going to get back and fly jets, and I could get through the therapy. Because at the very least, I wanted the use of my hands back no matter what I did. One day, there's a man standing at my bedside in a blue Air Force uniform, full colonel. And I think, well, are you one of the new surgeons here? It's an Army hospital. And he goes, no, just wanted to meet you. You know, Lieutenant Shul, you have pissed off the entire United States Air Force. And I said, you know, I really don't care at this point. I'm trying to get through another day here of ripping skin off my body here. And he seemed like a very distinguished man, very nice, very pleasant. And he said, what do you see in your future? I said, a bedpan? What are you, making jokes now? He said, I wanted to meet you. I came over, I wanted to meet you. And I'm going, you wanted to meet me? He said, yeah. I said, well, who are you? He said, I'm the chief flight surgeon of the entire United States Air Force. I'm the top doc. If I give you a flight physical and I've signed the top sheet and say you passed, nobody will question it. And I said, wow, really? He said, when you think you can pass a physical, because I've talked to your doctor and there's not a damn thing wrong with you. He said, you just look like hell. And I said, yeah, I get that a lot. Okay, yeah. He said, you have every chance of passing physical, even with your banged up fingers. But I'll be real hard on you and I won't give you any leeway if you can't pass it. I don't want you flying. I said, I don't want to fly if I'm dangerous. And he said, you let me know when you're ready. I'm 15 minutes across town. I am the chief flight surgeon of the entire Air Force. Is that not a miracle? This man appeared, and I said, well, why would you do this for me? You know what he said? He said, I like your attitude, kid. We need more people like you in the Air Force. I thought, wow, that's a powerful thing. I felt pretty good. All of a sudden, I was feeling strong. My surgeon came in and he said, yeah, I'll cut on you. You do your therapy. In 2-3 months, maybe you can get over there and see what you can do. It doesn't hurt to try. Well, the rest is history. I went over and passed the physical, no waivers. 1A, no waivers. He said, well, you look like hell, but yeah, but you're 1A, no waivers, and he signed the top sheet. My medical records were this high. No one's going to believe that, but they'll believe it when he signed it, and they did. And there came a magical day when I was released from the hospital, and they said, you have 48 hours to get back to the Air Force, get jet requal, and go to your A7 assignment. And I stood on the top step of those long concrete steps at Fort Sam Houston there. A blue staff car was waiting to take me away. I had not been out of the hospital for 1.5 years. You don't think I was terrified? I had no clue if I could still fly again, much less physically if I could even take it. All these grafts and skin grafts and scar tissue and bent fingers. I thought, holy, I'd probably pass out on takeoff. But I'm going to try. I'm being given another opportunity. As I stood on the top step, I knew 2 things to be very clear in life, and I'd like to share them with you this morning. I don't want you to forget them. Number 1, life is short and it's uncertain. And because it's both, how can we possibly miss the opportunity of each day? Number 2, pursue your passion. Live your dream today, now. Don't wait because of rule number 1. Armed with this very simple knowledge, I went back to the Air Force, terrified, a little underweight, still had some steel pins in my fingers. People looked at me sideways and saw my medical records and said, how the hell is he 1A? No, well, I had to prove that I could do it. And I did it. So I got back in the Air Force and was flying. I got in the first A-10 squadron. I was on the first A-10 demo team, and I was doing really good. And they said, wow, this kid's, he'll do anything you ask of him. Yeah, because, I'll tell you why. Because when I went back to the Air Force, I felt like I'd been reborn. I was a 2-year-old. It was like I had a second life. I'd been away from flying for 2 years, and I was like a 2-year-old. It makes colonels very nervous having 2-year-olds fly their jets, I will tell you that. But they knew I would take on any job because anything was better than laying in a hospital bed in a burn ward. They didn't quite grasp that. So when I was about 12 in my second life, I said, hey, I'd like to fly the world's fastest jet, the SR-71. And they go like, well, now see, this is the other part to my story is that the world is filled with no people. If you notice that, no people. You know, you shouldn't do that, Brian, because you're going to have to pass an astronaut physical to fly at 85,000 feet. And if they find anything wrong with that at all, you will be grounded for life. Now, as a 12-year-old, I'm thinking, yeah, but what if I could pass and I missed the opportunity of a lifetime because I was a big fraidy cat, like all the adults that were surrounding me. And they didn't get that. It's like, well, you got to be cautious. And isn't it amazing how many people go through life with fear? Better not try that. It might look bad, but I'm not very good at it. I might lose money. Maybe it won't work. How many people don't do their dream in life because they're afraid of failure? You cannot be afraid of failure in life. Anyone that was ever great in history that invented anything failed 1,000,000 times and then finally found it. I took that astronaut physical. And the guy said, well, you look like hell, but you passed 1A, no waivers. And I said, yeah, it works. The scar tissue works. It didn't, my arm didn't fall off. Well, I've been working out for 12 years. I was in the gym every day. And it paid off. And I got to fly the world's fastest jet. I'd like to share with you this morning, very briefly, the adventures of a 12-year-old flying the world's fastest jet. The SR-71 was your guardian of freedom for 25 years, helped win the Cold War, did more for this nation than you will ever realize. From 1966, when the Air Force started flying real missions, all the way to 1990, right at the beginning of the Gulf War. CIA actually flew it even earlier than 66 over Vietnam. All those photographs you had of Haiphong Harbor during the Vietnam War, those were all SR-71. 107 feet long, 80,000 pounds of fuel. Crew of 2, pilot and a navigator, cruising at 2,000 knots with ease. If you fired a .357 Magnum, the bullet exits the muzzle at 3,100 feet per second. This aircraft would climb with ease at 3,200 feet per second. Unbelievable, held every speed and altitude record in the 60s. It still holds every speed and altitude record as you're sitting here today in 2022. This was the jet that gave way to no other plane. This was the jet they said couldn't be built. It's all titanium. You can't do that. Kelly Johnson and his crew did miracles. And if you don't believe in miracles, go ask Ben Rich and Kelly Johnson. They're all dead and gone now. But how did you build an airplane that was impossible to build? Well, they said we invented technology as we went along. Now, there's some people with the right attitude. I'm glad they were on our side. A crew of 2 very totally different cockpits. So they teamed you up with a backseater that you flew with all the time. For 4 years, Walter Watson and I were a team. We were a crew because both cockpits were so radically different. He had all the spy stuff in the back, the cameras, the sensors, everything. My job was to keep the pointy end forward. And that was a pretty full-time job when you're doing a mile every 2 seconds. This is what my office looked like for 4 years. And you might think, wow, pretty ancient there. It looks like an F-106. That's a 57 Chevy, man. Your cockpit in your airplane is more complex and modernized than ours. Guess what kind of computers? They didn't have any computers in the airplane. Guess what kind of speed brakes and flaps? And we didn't have any speed brakes or flaps or anything. Guess what kind of super map reading display like I had in the A7? We didn't have that exactly. Now, we had some other magical stuff, but it was stuff so unique to this airplane that it just boggles the imagination. I highly recommend you read The Skunk Works by Ben Rich at how they built this airplane. Now, everybody was worried about all the scar tissue I had where they had grafted all the skin on me, and they thought it was going to explode or something. I don't know, they didn't know much about burn therapy, but people said, you're going to be wearing that space helmet. You're going to have to breathe 100% oxygen all the time for like 5 hours at a time. And, you got all that scar tissue on the back of your neck and everything. I just looked at him and I said, went into surgery 15 times and they were giving me 100% oxygen all the time when I was in there. So pretty sure I'm going to be okay. And people just looked at me like, yeah, I don't know if you can do this or not. When you're 12, you have no fear. You want to do something, you just do it. Even if you fall down and skin your knee, you keep going. I will say, getting used to the helmet and the visor was a little bit different. If you're a fighter pilot, you can take your mask off in flight, scratch your face, wipe sweat out of your eye. Or if you're a Navy pilot, pick your nose or whatever it is they do when they're flying. But now you were entombed in an environmental system for the whole duration. Now, they always said, watch what you eat before you go, because as you know, the higher in elevation you go, the more the evolved gases in your body expand. So they were kind of yanking my chain a little bit on my first 6-hour mission. They said, Brian, have the ham and cheese omelet in the in-flight kitchen today and put extra cheese on there because the protein will serve you really well in that 5th hour. And I thought, well, that makes sense. Cheese, protein, what could go wrong? Passing 72,000 feet in the climb that day, I thought I was going to give live birth in the cockpit. Walter's going, are you okay? If there's at 78,000 feet, when relief came, I very tearfully realized just how self-contained that entire environmental system was. Now, let's face it, it's a lot more fun being in the front seat than the back. I had a stick, I had a view. Walter had no way of flying the jet in the back, no stick, not much of a view. He was the heart of the mission, though. It was a 2-man team. Now, like I say, it's more fun being up front and seeing where you're going and everything. So here we are getting ready to do our Cuba run. Every week we went from Beale Air Force Base down, looped the island of Cuba, and came back. It was like a 5-hour mission. Just pissed off Fidel horribly. He just hated the fact that we could drag a double sonic boom right through his backyard, and he couldn't do a thing about it. So here we are getting ready to fly, and if you look closely at my spacesuit, it has a little happy face on it because it's fun. If you look at Walter's, not so much. You know, we didn't ever notice that on that slide, except for a few years ago. We looked closely and said, we got to use that. We only flew out of 3 locations, 2 jets in Okinawa, 2 jets in England, a dozen airplanes at Beale Air Force Base, California, just north of Sacramento. Now, we covered the globe geopolitically. We were flying all the time. I was out of the country 6 months out of the year. This is Okinawa, Kadena Air Base, getting ready to go up to North Korea, sonic boom their little shorts off. President Reagan was our commander-in-chief, and he loved this airplane. He knew how to use it. Did you ever wonder why Reagan won every SALT talk he ever went to? He'd show up with a stack of 8x10 glossies from Brian and Walter and say, you can't lie, Gorby. I got the proof right here. I'm sure that's a loose translation of what went on, but the fact is, he used us in ways, I will just tell you, we couldn't mention this years ago because people might think we were wasting gas, but one day the commies had a conference just like you're having here. And they invited all the bad guys to North Korea. They had the Vietnamese, the Chinese, the Russians. They didn't invite us. And they were having a big conference. Reagan said, have Brian and Walter take off out of Kadena, go on up to Korea, and fly a little figure-8 butterfly pattern. We're going, what the heck are we doing? We have photographed the entire country in the first 3.5 minutes. Well, it was Ronald Reagan's way, a sonic boom in there every 3.5 minutes, just letting them know that, yeah, hey, you're there and we're here and you can't do a thing about it, pal. We're out over the Sea of Japan making that big turn to come back through again, and I'm thinking, wow, all right. Over 4,000 missiles were fired at this jet in 25 years. Over 4,000. Not one piece of one was ever hit. A testimony to the men who built an airplane they said could never be built. Little footnote to history. Behind the jet here is the Kadena Marina, where the Navy has a little officers club where people are windsurfing and sailing and learning how to windsurf. And rumor has it that some SR-71 pilots on takeoff would suck the wheels up 10 feet off the deck and full burner go ripping across that marina, knocking windsurfers overnight. I think that's just a rumor personally. Now, that's a pretty cool picture. He's saying time-life photography. Look at that. You got the wingtips in. He's doing an engine run, one engine at a time. The nose wheel is leaning over. What a shot. Professional photography. Where the heck did I get that picture? That picture was taken by a 12-year-old that didn't have a clue what the word aperture on his camera meant. Let's review. Life is short. It's uncertain. Live your passion. Exercise your dream now. My passion was photography along with flying jets. And you have now mated me with the most elegant airplane ever built, and you're going to tell me no cameras allowed? Well, yeah, okay, I'll go along with that up to a point. But there was always a way to get permission. There always was. These are not illegal pictures. The photographs you're seeing this morning are all my own photographs. They represent the world's rarest collection of SR-71 photographs anywhere. By a 12-year-old that had no clue about photography, but just loved what he was doing, wasn't going to miss the moment. So we're sitting in the mobile car, the colonel and I, watching the engine run and mesmerized by the sound of this airplane that was just vibrating up through the tires of that vehicle. He looks over, he goes, "What's that camera doing there on the seat? You know you're not supposed to have a camera out here." As any good 12-year-old, I said, "Huh? What? Camera?" And then the sound of the jet just garnered our attention, and I had to think fast. I said, "You know, Colonel, if you had a photograph of that in your office, you'd be the only guy in the Air Force who'd have something like that." Now, this was a man that had flown the jet at one time and loved it and saw the picture. He never looked at me and he never moved his lips, but I distinctly heard, "You've got 10 seconds. I leaped out of the car against every regulation on an active runway, put one knee down on that cold concrete in England, said, "What the hell does aperture mean? I'll just try big numbers, that must be good." Got the wingtips in, I had a roll of 36, I took 2 pictures on my little F3, hoped that they were manually focused correctly. 3 weeks later, I got them back from my Kodachrome slide developer. And I thought, wow, that's a masterpiece. And this isn't to say, "Ooh, look at me, folks, I'm a great photographer." Oh, no, I didn't have a clue. This is to say, don't miss the moment of your life as it's whisking by, because like that stream that's passing by, you can never touch the same water twice. It's gone. I love that picture, and we have a big one of it in the gallery at home. Before you take off, you guys probably check your pitot heat and everything, make sure the heat comes on. So you can. We're checking the pitot heat to make sure we can turn the heat sensor off, because we'll melt the tube off from the heat generated at Mach 3 if we do. 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit average on the skin temperature of the airplane. If you never heard one take off, your life's incomplete, I'm sorry. It was a sound that penetrated your body thoroughly. Climbing out over Susanville with Mount Lassen in the background, California. I don't want to make any Cessna or Piper people feel bad, but from brake release to 26,000 feet, leveling off at 450, 3 minutes, 51 seconds. I think that's about 3 days in a Cessna, I'm not sure. Not a Piper, though, the Cessna. No. It's only 2.5 days. Well, you're climbing out, what, at 0.006 Mach? Okay. If you're going to go this fast, you're going to have to air refuel 2 to 5 times on a mission. One of the more difficult things ever done in this airplane. It's 15 minutes of root canal surgery. You're taking on 65,000 pounds. You're changing your gross weight by over 60,000 pounds. The center of gravity's moving aft, and oh, guess what? At 290, you fall out of the sky at this altitude. The tanker can barely give you 300 knots. So you have to tap one burner. Yeah, you heard me. One burner on the boom, which no airplane in history would ever do because it's way too dangerous. Now you're flying sideways, modulating 40 tons of titanium with one throttle, making sure that you don't snap the boom off, kill everyone, or kill yourself. Try this at night, in a turn, in turbulence, with lightning in your face. They don't pay you enough. The biggest horror stories I could ever tell you would be air refueling stories in this airplane. On my days off, on Saturdays, I'd go up on the tanker, and they'd love having you up. You could take all the pictures you want. And guys would say, "Why would you spend your day off going up there doing that?" And I'd go, "Wow, we're the only people in the world that get to be around this airplane. It's not going to be around forever. Why would we not want to do that?" That's why I have the rarest collection of photos. Nobody wanted to do it, and I was happy to do it. Here's another one of those Rembrandt lighting, professional-looking, unbelievable shots. I was sitting in the ready room one day in Okinawa, and the colonel goes, "Brian, it's your day off. Why don't you go up on the tanker today, see if you can get some pictures?" I said, "Well, sir, I think I will." This was the same colonel that now had a beautiful portrait in his office. The South China Sea route was really close to right after takeoff, so we went up, didn't have to orbit long, and here comes the jet on a real mission. Oozing fuel, the jet grew 4 inches in flight, so they built expansion joints into it. And this is one of the rare shots of the aerodynamic flow, that fuel oozing out. Rembrandt lighting. You think I had a clue about lighting and knew what I was doing? No. The boom operator goes, you got 10 seconds. I'm leaning over, can't put my eye to the viewfinder, just manually focusing with luck. I thought, well, maybe I'll try those smaller numbers on the aperture. Maybe that'll be good. I don't know what that does. It's a masterpiece. And again, not because I knew what I was doing or I'm a good photographer. It's because I didn't miss the moment. It's because I was there. And isn't it funny how life goes by so fast and we so often miss so much of it? Passing 50,000 feet, something you will never know. No, I hope you get to do this someday, really. The sky turns a very deep, dark blue, but it's nothing like leveling at 84,000 feet when you look out, and it takes your breath away. Now, I don't want you to think I had time to be taking pictures a lot in flight. I took a grand total of 6 in 4 years of flying the airplane. I have a grand total of 220 images in 7 years around the jet. So you can see how rare was the opportunity to do any photos at all. This is what the North Pole looks like from 85,000 feet. Soviets had put some new missiles around their borders up by the polar ice cap. I got to see 2 sunrises and 2 sunsets on this day because it was wintertime, taking off out of England. Saw the sun come up twice. It was pretty amazing. This is, we didn't have the term selfie back then. This is a self-portrait. Took the camera on 10-second timer, and it looks better in the book. You can see the reflection of all the gauges and all. I used to have it in my spacesuit pocket on a lanyard so I didn't drop anything. It was just something everybody did at least once. Now people say, oh, that had to be illegal. I looked through the entire Strategic Air Command handbook. Nowhere in there did it say, while flying the world's most sophisticated spy plane, pretty good idea not to have a camera in one hand and your other hand on the stick. I didn't see that written anywhere in there. It never even addressed it, so everyone did it at least once. Okay, I did it 5 times. People always ask me, what was your favorite missions? I could talk for an hour on that alone, but this was definitely one of them. That's the coast of Southeast Asia. And as luck would have it, Walter and I got to fly over the very spot where Shul was shot down about 13 years earlier. Don't think we didn't lay down some serious mock that day. Walter had to keep telling me to pull it back. We were going to exceed our turn radius there. And let's face it, what could be cooler than being a guy in the officers club with a Mach 3 patch on your arm? Because there was only a handful of us that could ever wear that. Only 90 men in history ever flew this jet. So we'd walk into the club. But the other thing is, if you're a fighter pilot, yeah, it's all about having the gun, bombs, blowing up stuff, shooting other airplanes down, maneuvering, high G. Well, we didn't do any of those things. It was a trade-off. One day I walked into the officers club, and I was a student still in training. And I had my instructor there with me, and I saw some of my old students. They were in F-15s and F-16s now. Hey, Major Shul, you're flying that Blackbird. Wow, that's so cool. And then, of course, the digs started. They're fighter pilots. So, Major Shul, what'd you do today? Fly some more straight and level? And, yeah, that was pretty much what we did. So I didn't know what to say. And I was just laughing. And my instructor put his beer down, and he said something to them that shut everyone up, because something they had never heard in their flying career. He said, yeah, we did Nebraska in 3.5 minutes today. And they just didn't even know what to say with that. That's the best way to do Nebraska, by the way. Just saying. Sometimes we'd issue prayers to him who holds all of us in his hands, and we always thought prayers got to heaven a little faster from 90,000 feet. Coming back into land near Mount Lassen, I was in T-38 chase. I was a T-38 instructor at Beale, so it afforded me the opportunity to get a lot of these kind of pictures where everyone had at least one shot, and they go, what, you have the camera again? You want another picture? These now are such rare and valuable pictures, and people call me to say, can I get a copy of that to show my grandkids what we used to do, And I'm just so glad I didn't miss the moment. It's totally legal when you're flying chase in the T-38, and I took advantage of it. And did I know I was going to write books and be a speaker, go all over the world and do slideshows and PowerPoints? And no, of course not. That's not the point of life. It's to grab life by the throat and do it right then, not miss the moment. And if you want more than your 15 minutes of fame, You be an SR-71 pilot. You fly your jet in a major air show where there's 100,000 people and you light the burners in their face. You land your jet at the show. You stand in front of the jet. You are a sky god. And I tell you, that's how we felt when we were in an air show. People were afraid to talk to you. They'd come up and it's like meeting the Pope. You know, like we're not astronauts. We're regular Air Force pilots. We did not get astronaut wings, any of that. We didn't fly out of the atmosphere. It's an air-breathing jet. But I will tell you, in this picture, under the wing, Ben Rich himself came over to England that year to see the air show, just see how the jet was flying. I'd never met Ben Rich. Kelly Johnson, I was too ill and sick by the time I got to the program. But here's Ben Rich and I talking like we're best friends. The man, the genius behind this airplane. And he's talking like we're pals. I'm actually taller than Ben Rich was. And this giant in the aviation industry, when we were done talking that afternoon, he said something I'll never forget. He said, "Brian, I really envy you." I said, "You envy me?" He said, "Yeah, you get to sit up there and feel what Mach 3 is like." He says, "You get to pump in those J58s every day, those Pratt & Whitneys." He said, "You get to be the tip of the spear." He said, "I built the airplane. I never got to fly in it." Do you think I ever flew the airplane again with the same perspective? Took it for granted, like, oh, yeah, it's our job. No, I'm thinking, suit this man up and give him my flight tomorrow. Perspective, something we should never lose in life. And so often we do when we always think, oh, the grass is greener and my life sucks. Or not. No, life's pretty darn good if you just see it in the right way. Baby jet used to keep us current in instruments and formation flying here over Lake Tahoe. It also helped with crew coordination. Walt and I got to learn how to communicate better. Mostly I just grabbed the stick and said, "Watch this." But the formation helped you with your refueling. Walter, I was teaching him how to fly the 38. He did pretty good. Here he is demonstrating straight and level flying. He was great now. But the real use we had of the 38 was safety chase. Here the SR has an emergency right after takeoff, and it has to land immediately. So it's trying to lighten its gross weight by dumping fuel. The T-38 will offer a safety assist. We just happened to be airborne that day, and someone just happened to have their camera. This is one of the rare shots you ever done of the jet and the chase over Beale Air Force Base, California. Even Lockheed didn't have shots like this. Again, so did I know that how valuable these shots were going to? Of course not. But it was just being the 12-year-old, not missing the moment. The only picture that I'm going to show you today, and I'm going to say that's some pretty good photography, is this one. Somebody figured out what the word aperture really meant. I'm in focus. The jet's in focus. Mammoth Lakes is in focus. We set that picture up. We had to try it 3 different times to get my buddy to fly dangerously close and high. I had a cable release on the camera, so I didn't have to have my arm up the way all those Navy pictures are. You know, you see the big arm up the way. We planned it out. It was my gift to myself on my last week in the Air Force in 1990. I knew I had 20 in, I was getting out. That very same year, they retired the jet in 1990. Budget decision. They could have flown it for another 8 to 10 years. It was flying better than it ever had. It actually was flying faster because the heating of the jet had welded it tighter than when it was the day it was built. They started flying jets off the base to museums. 30 museums have them today. If you have not seen one, I'm sure most of you have. Do. It's worth seeing. There came a sad day when the very last jet flew out of Beale. I would have taken more pictures that day, but tears welled up in your eyes as you realized you were saying goodbye to a legend, the likes of which we would never see again. A jet that still holds every record has never been surpassed. Leaving the gates of history, flying through the gates of legend, the airplane sits quietly, if not proudly, in 30 museums today. Every time I see one at a museum, there's a deep sadness of how quiet and still the beast is that roared to life every day in that hangar, oozing and dripping with special fuel and special oil and special hydraulics and special nitrogens. And it was a one-of-a-kind airplane. When I got out of the Air Force, I had all these photographs. And I was a teenager by now in my second life, so of course I knew everything. And I thought, man, I need to do a book or something. I took them to some professional people. I said, are these pictures any good? I have no idea. And it was kind of remarkable. I brought him to a man I trusted very much, and he was a very excellent aviation photographer who I admired. And he put it on the light table with the loop, and he didn't say a word for like 10 minutes. I was so nervous. I thought, oh, these are terrible. He just pushed his chair away. He said, do you realize what you have here? I said, no. He said, you got to do what we always wanted to do. We could get one flight in a career. They'd put us on a tanker. You got to do it every day. Why didn't you take more pictures? I said, well, I had a job, like to fly the plane. So I did some books, and Sled Driver was such a big hit that when the jet was declassified, I did my latest book, The Untouchables, which not only encapsulates our mission over Libya, but also talks about the Lockheed guys who never had a voice. All those civilian guys that were in the hangar every day, kept this jet flying for 25 years. No one ever asked them their story. I interviewed 23 of these guys. They're all dead and gone now. And I'm so proud that I put them in this book. Went to their homes, and they were old. And one guy said, I helped build the airplane. I helped build the jet. I was the rudder guy. I assembled it. I designed it. And he was like 84 years old, and he's sitting there with his wife in my office. And I said, well, okay, I have one question I've always wanted to ask you. There had to be one day when the very first SR-71 came off the assembly line, number one. You had never seen one before. No one had ever seen this design, this incredible looking airplane. What was that like when the first airplane, and you saw your creation? And he started, I thought he was having a stroke. He was like crying, and I thought he was going to pass out. His wife said, oh, don't worry, he's okay. He gets a little choked up at this, and he quit crying. He said, that was the greatest day in our life. He said, we knew we had created something the world had never seen, and we just knew it was something really special. And he was just so sincere. So I'm so happy. Those people are all dead and gone now. And I'm so happy I included them in the book. If you go on the internet tonight, you'll see these books for $500-600. I brought a very limited number because we only have a few left now. Today we're doing $275, and we are supporting Wounded Warriors, so just to let you know. Also, my little company did a 50th anniversary gold coin. These are not challenge coins. That's the front and back. They're actually gold pieces. Lockheed didn't do anything for the 50th anniversary. They're on to their airliners and all the new stuff now. I will warn you, if you buy my books, buy one of my books today, there are still some photographs that are highly classified that I'd appreciate if you did not mention outside of this room. I'm pretty sure we understand each other. I'm always going to be the sled driver guy now because of the internet and everything, but actually when I got out of the Air Force, I went on to fly with the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels doing books because I thought I was going to be an aviation journalist, and that was my calling in life. So I'm the only guy in history that got to spend winter training season with the Thunderbirds. Flying with them. And I'll tell you a little secret. If you want to fly with the Thunderbirds, don't do it during winter training season. They're not real good yet. And it was a little scary. Which led to my infamous phone call to the Blue Angels, which said, hey, I want to fly with you guys for the entire air show season. Imagine calling the Blue Angels and saying, just put me in the back seat for the whole year. Well, it's against every rule in the DOD handbook. And I said, if you want your book to be better than the Thunderbirds, boom, I was in. I spent the greatest summer in 1994 anyone will ever have. I flew with the Blues for an entire air show. So they won't publicize that because we broke every rule. And I had the photo op of a lifetime. There's 3 jets in this picture. How often do you think those 3 jets are lined up that well? How often do you think our jet is lined up with those 3 to get that picture? Now, you might think we look a little close here. You'd be right. We're counting rivets. We were almost killed here. He almost smacked into our canopy, and that happens. I was legitimately almost killed 3 times that year. People ask why I don't fly anymore. I just sort of retired right after the Blue Angel thing. Scared the pee out of you. And we taxied in that day. I said, hey, Dino, I used to teach this stuff for a living, and I was pretty good. But you scared me bad twice today. He goes, that's okay, partner. Scared myself 3 times. I also went out and I flew with the Air National Guard units around the country doing calendars. And I thought that was going to be my career. And then it just, with the advent of the internet, where you could get any picture of anything you wanted, doing aviation photo and stuff wasn't that big of a deal. And I had done all the flying my poor back. Here's a little ironic secret. I was born with a crooked spine. My flight surgeon one year in the Air Force told me, the one job you should have never done is sit in a cockpit and pull G's on your body. He says, you're all messed up. Your neck, he says, I went to the chiropractor just a few months ago. He said, you got some issues that we cannot deal with. He says, your neck's just all messed up. He said, yeah, all those 8-10 hours of doing that stuff. So I was able to hang up my spurs. I had 5,000 hours of pure joy. And people go, don't you miss it? Don't you miss it? Well, not really. I went out to nature where I'd always been anyway, and I found the real flyers, the birds. And I now look at the Raptors as fighter pilots and airplanes. And what I found as a flyer, that as I observe these birds out in nature, which I've been doing now for almost 20 years, it's more interesting than airplanes. Because I understand enough about aerodynamics to realize, wow, man doesn't really fly. He builds machines that fly and sits in them. Birds really fly. You going to tell me that's not a fighter pilot look on the face of that bald eagle? He's got that fish in his sights. He's got one wing down, forward leading flaps. He's got a splayed tail. Just an amazing maneuverability of these birds. So it's what keeps me busy today, and it centers me. I love being out there. And people always go, well, that's all great, Brian, but that had to be the pinnacle of your life right there. Rock star, yeah, fighting communism, flying the world's greatest jet. Walter and I, our claim to fame is we're the guys that did the Libya raid in 1986 when Reagan bombed Gaddafi. We're the only crew in history that flew 3 missions in 3 days in this jet. You don't want to do that. We did, going from England down to Libya and back every day. Well, yeah, that was great. We had a real job that meant something. We changed the world. We brought the Berlin Wall down. We took it to communism right in the gut and destroyed it. And you never heard about Gaddafi again after that. So we made a difference. But I'd have to say that's number 2. That's the second top moment in my life. The first was the day I stood on those concrete steps at Fort Sam Houston Burn Center and was given a second chance. The day that they said, you get a do-over. You not only get a second chance to get released, you're going back to fly jets again like nothing happened. You're getting a second chance in life. How many times do we get that? And isn't that all you can ask in life is the opportunity? What we do with that opportunity is up to us. That was number 1 for me. I thought, man, I'm 26 years old. I have no excuses now. I don't give a damn how much my hands hurt. I'm going to do it. They hurt a lot those first 2 years. I never told anybody. And yeah, flying with a crooked finger in the SR-71, putting that space glove on it was a trauma every day. But those guys were so great. They said, we'll figure out a way to get it on, Major Shul. We'll do it. There's always a way if you want it bad enough. So that was number 2. And people, I know I get a lot of comments on my LA speed story. And I want to tell it to you today so you understand the right, because the right version, people are sending it to me on email, and they got it wrong. And first of all, that story would have never come to happen if I hadn't spoken at Space Camp in Seattle one year, many years ago. Bunch of 12, 13-year-olds in little blue shorts and Space Camp T-shirts in July, and I'm their speaker. And I'm telling them, the SR was scary, and it was dangerous, and it was important, and it was serious. And a 12-year-old boy gets up, asks a question. And he asked the question I would have asked if I was in his position. Wasn't it ever fun? And I thought, I've been 12 twice in my life, and that is a good question. Yeah, if it's not fun, why are we doing it? Well, I thought of this story, and I thought it would just be told that day and never. Oh no, 34 million people now have seen that damn website and written me about it in their emails daily. So I will tell you, for those of you that don't know the LA Speed story, it is the day it was fun flying the jet. And frankly, between you and me, it was fun every day. Because when you're 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, you are in the hottest hot rod you will ever fly. Well, one day, Walter and I were nearly done with our training, and we were gaining hours in the airplane. So we took off out of Beale and hit a tanker in Idaho, ripped on up to Montana, zipped across Denver, took a right turn to Santa Fe, out over L.A., up to Seattle, back into Sacramento, 2 hours, 25 minutes. And we would do it backwards, hit the tanker, and we're just building time and experience. They're going to let us go fly real missions in another 2 weeks. And we had already made the turn in New Mexico. We're over Tucson, Arizona, right here. We're blowing cactus down 18 miles high. I can see L.A. from downtown Tucson. There's not a gauge moving in my cockpit. It's just still smooth as glass. It is like silk. We're at 87,000 feet, Mach 3.2, ripping across the Southwest. And I'm looking in the mirror going, yeah, you are doing it. It is you. You're not in a big dream like they used to give you drugs in the hospital. You'd have these dreams. Oh, no, it's you. We bad. And I feel sorry for Walter because he has 5 radios he has to monitor in the back seat. I used to fly single seat all my life now. I'm in the family model. There's a little division of duties. So I picked the toggle switch up, and sure enough, LA Center is controlling all the bug smashers and mortal planes below us. It's just, I got to just stop right here and say this is so great having an aviation audience. I don't have to explain everything. What's center? Yeah, okay. Back then, we didn't have GPS. So as you know, and some of you may be guilty of this, you had to know your ground speed. You know, you were probably one of those little Cessna guys. Oh, what's my ground speed? I don't know where I am. Hey, I flew T-28s for 2 years. I started at 200 knots, graduated at 2,000 knots. So I understand VFR, flying low. So LA Center is controlling all the traffic, and we're hearing all this stuff. And sure enough, there's some Cessna guy. This is Cessna November Alpha Tango. Have you got a ground speed radar for us? You know, and you know, Center would like to say, hey, pal, get off freak. Who cares? You know, but he doesn't, because you know, and I know, Center talks to you like you're John Glenn. Center is the greatest group of guys ever. They make you feel important when they talk to you. Cessna November Alpha, we show you 90 knots, 90 knots on the ground. You feel like somebody. Right after that, a twin Bonanza or twin Beach, whatever it was, come back up on freak to pimp the guy. Hey, you got a ground speed radar for us, Center? Center's like, yeah, it's Friday afternoon. Why me, God? Just go away. But no, he's going to talk to him like he's Air Force One. Yeah, twin Bonanza, we show you 220, 220 knots on the ground. Ooh, okay. And right after that, wasn't my fault. A Navy F-18 out of Lemoore pops up on frequency. And you knew he was a Navy guy because he talked real slick on the radio. Center Dusty 5-2 speed, check. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Dusty 5-2 has a ground speed indicator in that $1 million F-18 cockpit. In fact, in the heads-up display, it's right there in front of his fat Navy face. So why are we calling Center to broadcast our speed? Oh, I get it. We are just the meanest, baddest, fastest military jet in the valley today. We're taking our little Hornet jet over Mount Whitney and ripping across Death Valley. And we want everyone from Fresno to the coast to know what real speed is. And you can almost hear a little glee in the controller's voice, like, yeah, we put an end to this. Dusty 5-2, we show you 620, 620 knots across the ground. And it was that across the ground, it was a little flourishing, a little different to put the stamp of, okay, we've ended this. And that's a pretty legitimate 620 across Death Valley. Okay, I'll give you that. There was a hush on the radio. There wasn't an airliner from Seattle to San Diego wanted to be next. And freak, you know the etiquette. You don't want to be the guy to follow that. Unless you're an Army helicopter pilot or something. You don't know any better. And there was just a silence on frequency, and there we are. The moment, it's like time stood still for just a second. And a 12-year-old was reaching for the mic button. And I thought, no, I'm not in charge of the radios. Walter is the radio guy. If I do this, I'll upset. We're a crew. I don't want, no, it's the Navy. They must die. They must die now. I thought, no, but if I do it, we got 4 years to go. I don't want Walter to be upset. So while I'm going through this angst somewhere high over the Southwest, I hear a click of the mic button in the back seat. Ladies and gentlemen, Walter and I became a crew at that moment. His very best, innocent Danny Glover voice. LA Center, you got a ground speed readout for us? Aspen 30. And you know, Center had to give you that same voice. They didn't go, oh, gee whiz, wowee, hey, we never hear from you. No, they stuck right to their, which really made it all work. And you could almost hear a collective gasp from all the other people on Freak, like, the poor fools, they didn't hear the previous, what idiots, they're going to be crushed like a grape. And Center had to monitor 3 scopes as we went through them, so it took a little bit longer. Aspen 30, we show you 1,892 knots across the ground. And there was a hush on frequency, and when I knew I was going to like Walter a lot for the next 4 years. So when he came back and said, Center, we're showing a little closer to 2,000. And the greatest radio call I have ever heard in my career is when Center came back, and I swear to God, they said, well, your equipment's better than ours. So for just a moment, it was really fun. The Navy had been flamed, the king of speed lived, and a crew had been formed. So what do combat-hardened, commie-fighting fighter pilots do when they retire? I shoot pansies now, and I'm very proud of that. I'm really a nature guy. All those years in the Air Force, every weekend I was out hiking, doing something. In fact, my gallery in California motto is from butterflies to blackbirds. The coolest logo in town. Took us 2 years to come up with that. You try to mix nature and jet flying, I'm telling you, it's a tough one to do. So I'm gonna, before I finish today, I'm keeping to my time here. By the way, they said they might want to do a Q&A after, and I'm all for it, so I'll play that by ear. A lot of people say, Brian, I get what you're trying to say with your philosophy, man. Attitude's everything, keep perspective, and it's all about the choices you make, whether you're gonna miss your life out of fear or you're just gonna do it, because it goes by so fast. You look, seems like yesterday we were all doing that. That was 30 years ago. So I want to leave you with this thought. The next time that you're faced with a challenge, you're faced with an obstacle in your path, and you don't see any way you can get through it. There is no way you're going to ever use that hand again, but somehow you want to fly again. You just find your own barrier, and you know you need to be on the other side of it, and you think there's no way. Just remember this, that one day the SR-71 took off from Okinawa, Kadena Air Base, taxied out, taxiway Alpha, slid down on the runway, waiting for its appointed takeoff time. Sat there, oozing and dripping and rumbling. And the pilot that day could look out the little window on a 153-degree heading for 1.9 miles. He could see the roof of the hospital he had laid in a lifetime ago. Legend has it that on takeoff that day, the SR-71 did not climb out over the South China Sea to hit a tanker. Oh no. Instead made a hard 90 left turn at the end of the runway. Full burner, 300 feet. Some say much lower. Buzzed a certain soccer field, sending kids screaming and running, falling down, waving and crying. Rattled every window in a certain hospital without breaking one. And as that big black jet made an arc back to course, now that the entire base was awake, the pilot knew at that moment Einstein was right when he said, imagination is far more important than knowledge. Ask anybody at Lockheed when they were building this airplane. And that the sky really is no limit. The limits are those we set upon ourselves. On its final flight, the SR-71 flew from Palmdale, California, to the Smithsonian at Dulles Field in Washington, D.C., traversing the country in 68 minutes, setting 8 official speed records, averaging over 2,100 miles per hour before they put it to bed. You know, you can go weeks without food. You can go days without water. You can even last a few minutes without oxygen to your brain. But the second that you lose hope, you're done. I love the quote by Mark Twain, who said, the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. If I can inspire just one person in every audience that I speak to, just one person, reach that connection with them that they can be inspired to do all the things they thought, well, maybe I couldn't or not, then all that I went through was worth it.